2 days before Christmas, I stood on my mother's porch holding a tray of gingerbread for a party my son wasn't allowed to attend. No children this year, she told me on the phone. None. It's simpler for everyone. I believed her. Then I looked through the front window and saw my sister's 3 kids sitting around the tree in matching pajamas, tinsel in their hair, halfway through a plate of cookies. My mother opened the door and filled the frame with her body. "These children deserve to be here," she said. Here's what she didn't know. 3 weeks earlier I'd found a piece of paper folded in her junk drawer, tucked between the coupons and the spare batteries. And what I did with that paper at her Christmas party ended $18,000 of lies in under 4 minutes. My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 34. I've spent 11 years as a pediatric nurse in the town where I grew up, most of them on nights. I'm the one they call when a toddler needs an 4 and nobody else can find the vein. My hands don't shake. That's not confidence. That's training. In my job, panic is a luxury nobody pays for. The calmer I get, the worse the news usually is. Remember that. It matters later. At home, I'm just Owen's mother. He's 6, missing a front tooth, obsessed with dinosaurs and convinced that wood glue fixes everything. A belief he picked up from his grandfather, Andrew. Our house is small, 3 bedrooms, blue shutters, and it's paid for. Every board of it. I built that the slow way. Scholarship, 2 jobs, a car that started if you asked it nicely. Nobody handed me anything and I liked it that way. When you build a life with your own hands, you know exactly what it cost. What I didn't understand that winter was that someone else had been doing math on my life too. My husband, Daniel, was a lineman. He climbed poles in freezing rain so other people's lights stayed on. In June of 2023, driving home from a storm repair job, a truck crossed the center line. He was 33. Owen was 4. I learned that grief doesn't knock. It moves in. The insurance came to $150,000. I didn't buy anything shiny. I paid off the house and put the rest into a college fund. My husband is still paying for the roof over his son's head. That's who he was. His parents, Helen and Andrew, never faded the way in-laws sometimes do after a funeral. Every Sunday there's a chair for me and a booster seat for Owen at their table. No invitation required. Helen taught him to roll pie crust. Andrew taught him to build a birdhouse and let him hammer every nail crooked, calling it character. Their old orchard, 8 minutes from my house, is the center of my son's world. I'm telling you this so you understand something later. I didn't grow up believing family was proof of love. I married into it. But not everyone looked at that insurance money and saw a widow's lifeline. Someone looked at it the way you look at an unlocked door. 7 months after the funeral, my mother called and asked me to come alone. Margaret Foster doesn't ask. She arranges. In her kitchen, under the fluorescent light, she slid a letter across the table. Red letters at the top. Past due. My father, George, sat at the end of the table staring at the backyard like it owed him something. To understand that stare, you have to know that in 2021 the plastics plant closed after 34 years of his life. 59 years old, standing in a job fair line next to kids fresh out of high school. Nobody called back. His pension came in smaller than promised, and now he stocks shelves part-time at my brother-in-law Richard's heating and cooling company. My mother folded her hands like she was in church. 10 more days and the bank starts foreclosure. Your father would rather die than let the church ladies see a sign on this lawn. The Brookside Ladies Guild is my mother's entire kingdom. Losing the house wouldn't just be losing a house. It would be losing her face in front of the only jury she's ever cared about. I looked at my father's hands, cracked from 30 years of shift work, and I did what nurses do in an emergency. I moved toward it. I offered to pay the credit union directly straight to the loan. My mother had an answer ready before I finished the sentence. Changing the payer meant new signatures, forms, a trip to the branch, and there wasn't time. Then she played the card she knew would win. Your father will not stand at that counter while his daughter pays his debts in front of the whole town. I asked to see the statement. She brought a real one, letterhead, red stamp, account number, folded in half, her thumb pinning the crease so I only saw the balance line. I read it. I didn't unfold it further. That night I set up a standing transfer. $650 the first of every month. My mother cried and called me her good girl. My father never turned around. The transfers didn't stop for 23 more months. A monthly transfer becomes furniture. You stop seeing it. What I should have watched was everything stacked on top of it. Gum surgery $1,200. A dead furnace $900. Every emergency arrived with a deadline and a phone call. Always timed for the exact night I was too tired from a shift to ask questions. And in those same months, my sister Rebecca posted a photo of a new minivan in her driveway captioned blessed. My niece Peyton flew to cheer nationals in a matching family t-shirt. Rebecca's husband Richard owned a business everyone in town knew had been limping since 2022. And yet their life kept getting shinier while my parents' furnace kept dying. I noticed. I'm not blind. I just wasn't ready to follow the wire connecting those two pictures. My son felt it before I let myself see it. At Thanksgiving, my mother set places for the other grandchildren at the big table. Cloth napkins, the good glasses. Owen's plate sat on a card table in the garage, next to the recycling bins. For space, she said. I didn't argue. I carried our plates out to the garage and we ate there together, laughing about our breathtaking clouds. On the way out, I said one thing. If the garage is good enough for my son, it's good enough for me. After that, I cut our visits to once a month. Then came Owen's 6th birthday. A card signed Grandma and Grandpa with a $5 bill inside. The same week, Peyton got a weekend in Columbus, hotel competition, a new jacket. I asked my mother calmly why one grandchild got a weekend and another got $5. Owen doesn't know the difference, she said. He did. 6-year-olds always know. They just don't have the words yet, so they hand the hurt to their mothers to carry. I told myself that was as bad as it would get. It wasn't even the rehearsal. By November, I'd been sending money for nearly 2 years. My mother called again, warm as syrup. The family Christmas party would be at her house this year. The guild ladies invited, the pastor's wife, everyone. Could I help with the food? $300 just this once. I said yes before she finished. Then, almost as an afterthought, oh, and sweetheart, adults only this year. No children. It's simpler for everyone. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, looking at a crayon drawing of a T-Rex in a Santa hat taped to my refrigerator. I had just bought food for a party my son was banned from. Before I could figure out how to tell him, he showed me what he'd been building in Andrew's workshop for 3 evenings straight. A small wooden star, sanded soft, painted gold, with Grandma M burned crookedly into the back. Can I give it to her at the party? He asked, gap-toothed and glowing. I called my mother that night and asked for 15 minutes at the start of the evening so my son could hand his grandmother a star and leave before the adults sat down. She didn't even pause to pretend to consider it. Rules are rules, Clara. Don't make this hard. He won't even remember it by Easter. I told Owen the party would be boring, all taxes and coffee, and that we'd find a better place for the star. He took it quietly the way kids take things and went back to his dinosaurs. The star sat on our counter for weeks, its crooked gold arms pointed at me like a question I hadn't answered. That Sunday at Helen's, I watched what the other version of family looked like. Flour on the counter, Owen cutting biscuits with a water glass, Andrew drawing up plans for a birdhouse like it was a courthouse blueprint. Helen dried her hands and looked at me the way she looks at a pie that isn't setting right. Honey, she said, you don't owe anyone a bridge that only carries traffic one way. Driving home in the dark, Christmas lights sliding past the windows, I felt something under my ribs turn over. The money went one way. The love went one way. The rules only ever landed on one child in this family. And he was mine. Christmas was 3 weeks out. I told myself I'd get through the holidays first, keep the peace one more season. The junk drawer had other plans. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I'd stopped by with groceries after my mother called again about the propane bill. And while she was on the phone with Rebecca in the next room, I went looking for scissors to cut a card free from its packaging. Her scissors live where every mother's scissors live. Third drawer down by the wall phone, buried in batteries and rubber bands and coupons from another decade. They were there. So was something else. A window envelope from the credit union, addressed to my parents, already slit open. I know that logo the way I know my own name tag. It's the logo I've been sending $650 toward every month for almost 2 years. I meant to move it aside. That's the truth. But the page inside had slipped halfway out, and printed across the top, in the plain confident type banks use when there's nothing to worry about, were words that didn't belong in the same house as past due. I stood very still. Down the hall, my mother laughed at something my sister said. I picked up the page and the kitchen went quiet around me. I unfolded it fully. It was a payoff letter, the kind a bank sends once in the life of a loan, addressed to George and Margaret Foster, dated 9 years back. They'd kept it the way other people keep a diploma. This letter confirms that mortgage account ending 4471 has been paid in full as of October 14, 2016. I read it 3 times the way I double-check a medication dose, hoping the second read would fix the first. October 2016. 9 years before my mother slid a past-due letter across this same table with her hands trembling on cue. Unless they'd borrowed against the house again, there had been nothing here to foreclose on since before my son was born. I didn't scream. 11 years of night shifts have built something into me that takes over when the news is worst. A stillness that arrives like a second nurse. I memorized the account number and the date. I folded the letter along its original crease, set it back exactly where I'd found it, and closed the drawer. Then I finished carrying in the groceries, kissed my mother's cheek while she was still on the phone, and drove home with the radio off. 9 years. I had been saving a house that was never drowning, because somebody had figured out that a grieving nurse pays her family's bills without asking to see the wound. That night, after Owen was asleep with one arm around a stuffed triceratops, I did what I should have done 2 years earlier. I charted it. I printed every transfer since January 2024, 24 payments of $650, plus the gum surgery, the furnace, the party food. I wrote it on a sheet of Owen's graph paper, 1 line per wound, and totaled it at the bottom the way I total intake and output at the end of a shift. $18,000. Then I opened my sister's social media. Because Rebecca has never once locked her life. I matched dates. The week of the dying furnace, cheer nationals in Columbus. The week of the gum surgery, the minivan, captioned blessed. Every emergency in my mother's house lined up with a celebration in my sister's, like a heart monitor next to a receipt. Under all that cold arithmetic, one warm thought kept surfacing, and it was the one that finally hurt. My father signed for that house once. My father knew. Here's something most people don't know. And it's the reason this story ends with paper instead of a shouting match. When a mortgage is paid off, the lender files a release with the county recorder. It's public record. Anyone can walk in and ask. On my lunch break, still in my scrub top, I walked into the county recorder's office and gave the clerk my parents' names. It took her 4 minutes. Satisfaction of mortgage recorded October 2016. No new mortgage since. No lien. The last door I thought might still be open closed with a click only I could hear. She stamped my copy certified with a raised seal you can feel under your thumb. On the way back to work, I stopped at the credit union and asked a few general questions, nothing about my parents' account specifically. I learned the letter format had changed in 2019, new logo, new banner. The letter my mother had shown me in 2024 was a fossil from years earlier, reused like a stage prop. Now I knew what I knew how much. What I still didn't know was how my father had sat through all of it without a word. I decided to give him one chance to be honest before I did anything else. First, though, I drove to the orchard because I've learned you don't walk into surgery without a consult. Helen poured 2 mugs of the strong stuff, and I laid everything on her table: the certified copy, the ledger, the match dates. She read it twice without a word, and Helen's silence has always felt like being held. "What do you want, Clara?" she finally asked. "Not what do they deserve. What do you want?" "I want it to stop," I told her. "I want my son to never again be the only child in a garage. And I don't want to become the person screaming in a driveway, because that person loses even when she's right." "Truth told calm is still the truth," Helen said. "But you tell it standing up, not kneeling." We built the plan at that table. My father would get one private chance to come clean, with a door he could walk through with dignity. If the lying continued, especially in public, the truth would be told in public once, calmly, with the paper doing the talking. I found my father on the loading dock of Richard's warehouse, eating a sandwich out of the same dented lunchbox he's carried since before I was born. I sat down on a crate beside him and didn't dress it up. "The mortgage was paid off in October 2016, Dad. I've seen the county record. I've been sending money for a foreclosure that doesn't exist." His hands went still on the lunchbox, then they shook. My father's hands don't shake. He didn't deny it. "Your mother handles the envelopes," he said. Then, quieter, like a confession that had been waiting years for someone to hear it: "It was supposed to stop after a few months. Will you tell the truth at Christmas? I'll stand next to you while you do it." He looked down at the concrete and chose. "Don't make me choose, Clara. Your mother. Your sister. This job." He gestured with his chin at the warehouse behind him. Richard's warehouse, the only place still willing to hand a 63-year-old man a paycheck. I kissed the top of his head and left him with his sandwich. He went home and told my mother anyway. I know because the phone tree lit up that weekend, and it wasn't an apology tour, it was a controlled burn. She called my Aunt Susan and 2 guild ladies with a story smooth as a funeral lily. "Poor Clara hasn't been right since Daniel died. She's gotten strange about money. Pray for her." It's a classic move. When a liar knows the truth is coming, she doesn't argue with the evidence. She discredits the witness first, so that when the truth finally arrives, the room hears grief instead of facts. There was one crack in the plan, and her name was Susan. My father's sister, sharp as a tack, had watched the plant close and always wondered how George and Margaret managed so comfortably. Instead of praying for me, she called me directly. "What's really going on, child?" I looked at the folder already sitting on my counter. "Come to the Christmas party, Aunt Susan. Watch who goes strange." 2 days before Christmas, I drove over to drop off the food I'd promised, and Owen was at the orchard helping Helen butter cookie sheets. I was alone when I pulled up and saw the glow in the front window. My sister's 3 kids in matching pajamas, draping tinsel on the tree 2 days before the adults-only party, in the house where my son couldn't get 15 minutes to hand his grandmother a wooden star. My mother opened the door and filled the frame with her body. "No children this year, Mom," I said level. She looked me in the eye. "These children deserve to be here." I handed her the gingerbread and drove home. That night I ironed the dress Daniel used to call my courtroom dress, the one I wore whenever life required signatures. I set the yellow folder next to my keys. Christmas Eve, the house looked like a magazine cover. Electric candles, a tree dressed to the collarbone in gold, a buffet table anchored by a ham my $300 had bought, guild ladies in their good coats, the pastor's wife, Aunt Susan by the bookcase watching the room the way I watch a monitor, and on the staircase in church clothes my sister's 3 children, the adults-only rule having quietly died at the door it was invented to guard. Around 8, my sister dinged a spoon against her glass and raised a toast to our mother, who holds this family together with her own 2 hands. Glasses went up. Then one of the guild ladies said, warm with admiration, that she didn't know how my parents managed so well on a pension these days. My mother straightened her spine, put her hand flat on her chest, and said it. We manage because we don't owe anybody anything. We have never taken a dime from anyone. The clock on the mantel ticked twice. I felt the room the way you feel a pulse. Mom, I said, at the volume I use for medication instructions, low enough that everyone leans in. Tell them about October 2016. Her smile stayed up but stopped reaching anything. I laid the certified copy on the white tablecloth, the raised seal catching the lamplight. Satisfaction of mortgage. Paid in full October 2016. 9 years before you cried at your kitchen table about losing this house. There was never any foreclosure. Aunt Susan picked it up, read it, and looked at my mother with 60 years of shared history draining out of her face. Lori, this is the county seal. My sister broke first the way she always does. It's family money. It stayed in the family. So was mine, I said. My mother cycled through her whole repertoire in under a minute. The papers were wrong, banks make mistakes. I was cruel to do arithmetic at Christmas, until the mask came off entirely and her voice went to a hiss I'd never heard from her. Ungrateful. 18 years I raised you. That's when my father stood up. Told my brother-in-law to sit down, and he did. Then quietly to my mother, Lori, it's done. He didn't defend me. But he stopped lying, and after 2 years that was its own kind of thunder. I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and tapped 4 times. Then I turned the screen so the room could see it. Standing transfer canceled. The support ends tonight. I picked up my purse and wished the room a Merry Christmas. Nobody answered. I drove 8 minutes through the season's first real snow to the orchard, where every window glowed gold, and watched through the glass as Andrew held my son up on his shoulders so he could set a crooked gold star, the one that said Grandma M on the back, onto the top branch of a different family's tree. Some houses you knock on. That one was already mine. January looked like plain numbers. The transfer still leaves my account on the 1st of every month. $650, same as always. It just changed direction now. It goes into Owen's college fund. The first time I watched it land there, the knot under my ribs finally untied itself and left without a note. My mother called 11 times in 2 weeks. I blocked the number after the message where I was apparently destroying her reputation with the guild. The guild handled it the way small towns do. No trial, just a new name at the top of the hospitality committee by spring. My sister sent one text. You've torn this family apart. I read it twice and put the phone down. I hadn't torn anything. I'd only turned the lights on. My father sent a Christmas card 10 days late, 2 $20 bills folded inside a paper towel, and one line in his cramped handwriting. I'm sorry. I didn't send it back and I didn't call. I put it in the box where I keep the things people said when they finally tried. On Christmas morning, while a certain house across town sat quiet behind its perfect tree, my son came down the orchard stairs to cocoa and paper crowns, and the only party that ever mattered had a guest list of 4 and a crooked gold star presiding over all of it. I used to think family was the people who share your blood. It's the people who make room for your child without being paid to do it. My son deserves to be where he's wanted, so that's exactly where we live now.